Hi, this is Rick Gonzalez-Rothi with Mango for You, where we talk about health, writing, literature, and the oddity of some things. When I was little, my mother used to read to me from a book. Sometimes she would read to me stories she had written herself, as she was a great writer. So when I read stories from a book, I get a certain meaning out of them. But when I listen to words of somebody telling me a story, I get a slightly different meaning. What I'd like to do today is to read to you a short story that I wrote upon reflections of my return to my country of Cuba 53 years after I had left as a refugee. I entitled it Going Home. 8 of us crammed into 2 Russian-made cars. ¿Qué dirección? Asked the driver. Avenida Milanés and San Gabriel. He looked at me oddly. You mean 8th Street and corner of 15th? The streets of many Cuban cities no longer bore the names of historical heroes or saints. We pulled up to the curb. The house was painted reddish pink, not the pastel green that I remembered. There were bars on the window. The flagstones Papi had picked for the facade had been painted over with white paint. Number 23 and a half, Old Milanés Street. We exited the vehicles, my wife, my daughters, and their husbands. A young man stood by the window of what was once our house. Shaved head, bare-chested, and in his mid-30s, he seemed alarmed at the Americanos stepping out of cars with drawn and aimed smartphones and video cameras, lenses panning up and down the street. I approached him in a Cuban slang Spanish. Mira, chico. I explained that I had lived at 23 and a half Milanés 50 years ago and that my father had built this house. A petite bird-frame woman, probably in her early 80s, peeked out the front door. She overheard us and stepped to the threshold. Abuela, said the young man, este hombre said he used to live here. Her expression was confusion, bordering on trepidation. Señora, my name is Ricardo. By now the neighbors were curiously gathering around about us. I left Matanzas when I was 13. My father Pepe owned the grocery store on the corner. It suddenly dawned on her that she had been assigned the house we surrendered to the authorities a half a century ago. It was as if she'd seen a ghost. I continued. I remember Juanito next door. He used to let me watch him refinish his furniture in his shop. And Toto and Villita, who lived behind the bakery across the street. Toto used to give me pastelitos when I washed his car. The woman's demeanor changed. Juanito died 2 years ago, as did Toto. The shirtless young man said, Abuela, they want to see the old house. Permítelos entrar. I was embarrassed, never intending to intrude. No, señora, no es necesario. She stepped aside and then waved us in. A motor scooter adorned the foyer. The gray tiles were the same. So was the pale green paint on the walls, except where it was flaking. We stepped through the corner of the living room where our television used to be. The broadcasts from WCMQ were long ago replaced by state-controlled Tele Rebelde. We walked past what was my bedroom. Broomsticks nailed to each other corner of the beds tethered a mosquito net. I didn't recognize the furniture. I wondered whether my books and toys might still be behind those closet doors after I begrudgingly closed them 53 years earlier. We walked past the bathroom. I recognized the familiar sink where I watched Papi shave, the green porcelain toilet. The bowl was devoid of a toilet seat, and the top of the tank was missing. Absent of soap, shaving brush, and mirror, the razor and the shelf below the mirror over the sink looked exactly the same, but now supported a lone wooden hairbrush with missing bristles. What was my parents' bedroom was neat but sparsely furnished. A bed and a rocking chair I didn't recognize. My little brother's bed was gone. Where once an image of the Virgin of El Cobre hung, a poster of a generic landscape clung from a single nail above the bed. My daughter stepped ahead of me into the kitchen. It was as plain and neat as I remember it, but missing were the shortwave radio and the dining room table. A few dented pots and pans lay prone on a cloth in the counter. I recall the odor of boiling salted codfish permeating the house, like when Mommy used to make it every Wednesday, without fail. Not this Wednesday. The aroma was only imagined, and there was no food in sight, and the pantry looked empty. I stepped around the dirt and tile shards bordering a hole in the terrace where it appeared the plumbing had had some recent emergent surgical intervention. Looking out the roof terrace into the backyard, the sour orange tree my grandmother had planted was replaced by a partially dilapidated one-room shack. The flowers she so loved were gone. On the way out, the side courtyard where Papa used to rock me when I was little was bare. The hammock was gone. One rusty eyebolt from which it hung remained. The whole tour lasted maybe less than 5 minutes. My head throbbed with melancholy, then anger, then remorse, then self-pity, and then a catharsis of sorts. It was an odd feeling, like thinking I was about to eat a pickle in the darkness, but it turns out it was an Oreo cookie I bit into. I thanked the kind lady. I told her Mommy and Poppy would be glad that she had given great love to the house all these years. I hugged her and I wished her well. Then I stepped out to the sidewalk. We turned the corner onto St. Gabriel Street. Where once Poppy's grocery store stood was now a barren lot. The driver said that the building had been torn down years ago. I wrapped my face in my hands. As we drove down the street, the sidewalks seemed a lot narrower than I remembered them.